It's the Bitcoin Capitalist Show, and we got Jake Nomada. He is the digital nomad of digital nomads, and pretty much everyone knows this guy. And I found out, I'm going down to Paraguay, going out to dinners, and every single person knows you. I go to all these countries, everyone knows this guy. He's kind of the center of the digital nomad in Latin America, and he was doing it before everyone else was doing it. And this is the guy I go to when I needed, resource of information on going to Paraguay for the first time, where to go. I got stranded in Bolivia once in Santa Cruz, and I hit him up. He's been there. He knew what to do, where to go. So little introduction, Jake Nomada right here, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Travis. It was nice to meet you. We were in Panama together. We seem to run in the similar circles. So, yeah, man, been down here since 2014 and no plans of leaving. So
yeah, we actually met at the rooftop at Selena's in Casco Viejo. Had a couple of beers, and Noriega is a mutual friend, and we compared each other's Casa wallets and became friends.
Something like that, yeah.
We're Bitcoiners.
Yep.
So you're in Guadalajara right now, and anytime I go on a social media, every freaking digital nomad is in all these guys. Everyone's in Guadalajara right now. All these people migrated from Panama to Guadalajara, and it's off the top of everyone's list right now. I've never been. What is so attractive about Guadalajara?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the first time I went to Guadalajara was in 2018, and I was walking on like the main tourist area. It's called Avenida Chapultepec, and there were no gringos there for the 2 weeks I was there. I didn't see a single other foreigner. And fast forward to 2021, 2022, 2023, I've been popping in and out of Guadalajara. There's probably 50 times the amount of foreigners. I mean, you go to any mall, to the walking street, to a club, there's foreigners. It's not like Panama or Mexico City or Medellin, but it's definitely taken off for remote workers, digital nomads, those type of people, because it's super livable. Yeah. And I think the biggest difference between Guadalajara versus other places in Latin America is that the people here are like very sharp. They've got like legit careers. It's a budding tech hub.
It's like a business place, safe, kind of looks like.
There's tons of business here. The locals, it's expensive, to be honest. It's not super cheap because a lot of the locals actually have, solid income. And so the economy is good here. It's pretty safe, good nightlife, friendly people, good looking chicks. Like, I think a lot of digital nomad bros are starting to move here. So
no, I just was on TikTok and I forgot this guy's name. I was going to ask him if he just started, and he was a total digital nomad bro, and he was in Guadalajara doing a bunch of videos, and I was just thinking about you. Now, have you spent any time in Monterrey? Because I just did my last podcast with my buddy, and he's from Monterrey, Mexico, and he raves about that place, and he's like, you got to go visit.
Man, I've heard interesting things about Monterrey. I haven't actually been there myself, but I've got a couple buddies, and it's one guy loves it. Like, he's like, that's the best city in Mexico. It doesn't, nothing else compares. But then the other guy's like, no, Monterrey blows. Like, I would never go back. So it's definitely.
So the problem with me in Mexico is I am from Southern California, right? And like, when I think of Mexico, it was me like not being under 21 and going to Tijuana and raising hell and running from the freaking federales every weekend. Yeah. And then, I have Cabo San Lucas for spring break.
Yeah.
And Cancun. So like, I just think of like, partying, but just like Mexico has so much more to offer. And I haven't heard one person say a bad thing about Mexico City. And those are on, my bucket list this year to go see.
Yeah.
Now, is Guadalajara a long-term thing for you, or are you just staying? And then if not, is there somewhere else next on the list you want to go?
Yeah. So the thing about Mexico, and I think this is where a lot of us gringos, especially like, you're from Southern California, even in the Midwest of the States where I'm from, there's tons of Mexicans, right? And a lot of times I think we associate like Mexicans with like cholo culture. like
Mhm.
the fucking Dickie Wrangler shorts below the knees and like the backwards baseball caps and stuff like that. And when you get into like Guadalajara, Monterrey, those type of places in Mexico, that's not the culture at all.
It's like
So
business dudes.
yeah, it's completely different,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of it's a weird thing where we have these stereotypes of Mexicans in our heads being from the States, and then you come to one of the bigger cities in Mexico, and it's just nothing like that. So Guadalajara for me, I mean, I enjoy it. I've been here for a little bit, but I won't be here forever. I miss nature. I miss the beach. I miss yachts. I miss mountains. That's the biggest downside to Guadalajara is there's no nature.
No. So what's next like on your dream city like you want to live in next? You want to just hop around or are you
No, I
trying to
need
do
to,
like, hey, I'm gonna live here for 6 months, or do you just want to like hit the road again?
no, I need to get a base. I need to get a base, couple base cities. I've never been able to do that. I think I've been in Guadalajara for a long time. Spent a ton of time in Bogota, ton of time in Mazatlan. Those are some of the places I've
Now,
spent.
question. I just asked this in my last interview, but is Mazatlan safe?
I mean, is it safe? No, it feels safe,
Okay.
but then you hear about like all the crime, and then you're like, is this actually safe? Like, should
Hmm.
I be walking around drunk at 3 a.m. in Mazatlan? I mean, it feels
Oh,
fine.
yeah.
I've never been like, you know, I've not had many issues. I only time I had an issue in Mazatlan was it was my fault, where I
Hmm.
was doing really stupid shit like smoking weed in an abandoned house at dusk. Like,
Okay.
that's the only time I've had an issue in Mazatlan. Like if I'm chilling in the tourist areas or in the upper class areas, it's pretty safe, and it's I mean statistically it's not safe, but on the flip side, the cartels are so invested into that city.
They don't
Like
want
they
trouble.
own hotels, apartment buildings, so they have like a incentive to not have petty crime there.
Well, what we talked about in the last interview about Mazatlan was like that's the Sinaloa era, and there's not like a turf war, so it's like
Yeah.
it's everything's just calm. They want to be calm, so that's interesting.
Well, and they basically kill like criminals. Like if you're going around robbing people,
Yeah,
they will find you and kill you and make an
it's
example of you.
it, the
So
have you been to Cuba before?
yeah,
Yeah, like I went to Cuba. My girlfriend at the time, she got food poisoning, and I had never been there. I'm like, and I was just like, wow, I think this is gonna be. I had no idea. I knew nothing about Cuba. I'm like, I think this is gonna be really dangerous, really poor country. I just grabbed a beer and I started wandering, and I've never met nicer people. And no one messed with me. People would come up and just start having these long conversations with me, and like you kind of find out like if you mess with the tourists there, they disappear you because that
yeah,
is their revenue. And that was the weirdest experience because, like, being from California, like, if someone randomly comes up and starts talking to you, you're like, they want something from me. I'm like, get away. But after a couple of days there, like, you get used to people. They're like, they want to know what the outside world's like. I would go to restaurants and the waiters would sit down at my table and just be like asking me about California. And I was like, oh, I just flew into Cancun. They're like, what's Cancun like? And it's literally a 30-minute flight, but they've never left
yeah.
the island.
Oh yeah, no,
It's
Cuba.
the weirdest thing.
Well, in Cuba, I mean, it's just a mind fuck there because a lot of those people can't even afford to get on the internet.
Well,
So they
like outside the hotel I was at, the which actually blew up and killed like 20 people. There's like three nice hotels in Havana, and the one I stayed at had the rooftop pool, and there was a gas leak, and it blew up and it killed 17 tourists this year. And that
I
was
went to
like the
that pool.
nicest.
I know exactly what pool you're talking about.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know, yeah.
And there's that hotel, and the people will be outside with their phones trying to get free Wi-Fi from the hotel and stuff. And they didn't know, they didn't watch any Netflix. They had nothing going on there.
Oh yeah,
Now, I'm curious about two things. Have you gotten your Armenian residency, or are you doing that right now?
yeah. I started that process. Hit a bump in the road, and then just didn't really follow through with it. Um, Basically, like with there was an issue with apostiling, and
Hmm.
I think I was in Panama, and I had to go back to the States to do something with the apostille, and I just said screw it. So I actually just and then I like a month after I said screw it, they instituted that CBI program.
What's
And
that?
the citizenship by investment program they have now. So they kind of changed that up. So I didn't even follow through with it. I mean, looking back on it, maybe I should have, but at this, I'm not too concerned with that at this point.
Well, my mom's Armenian, and I was trying to do the Armenian thing by descent, but I mean, it's like 2 generations out, and I went to the embassy here with like all my documents and stuff, and like it was kind of like I was like a kid in school, and I had like all this super prepared stuff. Like I was on Ancestry.com, just like I felt like I had like a slam dunk, and this chick was just throwing my papers on the ground, and then there was like one paper she's like, "This might hold up," and then they never got back to me. But I feel like if I take that and actually go to Armenia, I can get it, and then worst case, I might get my residency. And then my friend Paul from Paraguay, he just finished the permanent residency there, and he said it was pretty easy, and he had some Rex. I think like that's like if you're an experienced kind of digital nomad, you already have residency, that's a good option, but like it's not a great first option because I don't think that part of the world's gonna be where you're gonna want to be at. Because like they're the only Christian country is surrounded by Turkey, and they're at war, and they're not a very strong country, but it is a good flag to plant. And I really think with like you look at all the crap going on in the world, I think the Southern Hemisphere is going to be like the unscathed place, and where you can make long-term investments and not worried about war or any of this stuff. And I think in the coming years, I think there's going to be a lot of capital that's going to flow into Central and South America to kind of get out of some of these conflict zones.
Yeah, I mean, historically, like the whole Southern Cone has been like the safest place in the world, like Paraguay, Argentina, Southern Brazil, Chile. So yeah, if shit really pops off, I guess some would consider it already have popped off, but that area of the world is going to be super safe. I don't know if I'm going to ever invest money in Argentina or Brazil due to their politics and things like that. But a place like Paraguay or even Chile, if they don't go full socialist, I mean, over the last few decades, both of those places have been pretty solid.
I was just in Chile for the first time, and like just from what I seen online in the pictures, I was like, Santiago is going to be this super rich, beautiful city. And I get there, and I was staying at a hotel like down the old downtown next the Plaza de Armas, so I could walk to that and all the stuff. And I started walking around, and I've been all over the place, and I was like, man, I don't feel safe here. There's just homeless people everywhere, and they've graffitied every wall. So like from what I heard is they had a lot of riots during COVID. They tagged the whole entire city, and it's sad because the infrastructure, it's not like a Buenos Aires, but it's close. Like it has beautiful architecture buildings, but nothing's been kept up. And then they graffitied everything, and then the homelessness, which and the other thing that I noticed is just trash everywhere. And but I talked to a lot of Chileans, and they're like, it was kind of like a thing like Costa Rica. Like no one goes to San Jose. They're like, everyone kind of avoids Santiago right now. Everyone goes to the south, like Bucan, and they're like, it's awesome. Mm-hmm. It's the great outdoors.
Yeah.
So next time I go, I want to go check out, the south. And then the opposite of that was for me was Buenos Aires. All the Paraguayans and people I know were like, oh, it's so dangerous there. There's crime. There's all these muggings, and they really were psyching me out because I traveled by myself. And I got to Buenos Aires, and I do a lot of running. I was like, I never had a problem anywhere. I felt safe. It was super clean. People dress well. They're educated. It was very cheap to eat and all that stuff. And I was like blown away. And that's the only city in the Southern Hemisphere that's like a European city. There's nothing, unless you can come up with something, there's nothing on that caliber.
It's the only big city in all of Latin America that has that vibe, right? It's the only like European style. The issue with Argentina, though, is, I mean, they literally just destroy their economy and currency all the time. Like the past decades, they seem to do that every time. So living there and, enjoying a great life in Argentina is a fantastic idea because it's super cheap right now. It's still not like violent, even though, they've experienced hyperinflation. But to plant a flag there, to get permanent residency or get a citizenship, you can get citizenship there in 2 years. Just with.
Do they have, like, I've looked at the permanent residence. You have to live in the country to get it, though, right? They don't do like the no-show.
No, it's not the no-show. You do have to spend time there. There's no actually definitive, like, you have to spend 6 months a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit, it's structured very oddly, but generally they recommend spending 5 to 6 months a year. And after you do that for 2 years, there's some weird law where essentially you have a temporary residency. And if you have, after 2 years of temporary residency, you can apply for citizenship, but you have to have time left on your residency permit to start that process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird thing where you basically have to have a 3-year temporary residence permit. And then after 2 years in the country, you can apply for that citizenship automatically. And you have a very high likelihood of getting it. But if you are getting like these 1-year temporary residencies where you have to renew them every time, then you have to actually wait 3 years. So it's really dependent on if you can get like a 3-year permanent resident or temporary resident.
I've actually never met or anyone that's done the residency or citizenship there. And I met one person that's done the Chilean one, but they lived in the country. Yeah. And it's like, here's the thing, like most people like where they're living, like if you're from the States and they kind of want a backup plan, but they don't want to move. So like pretty much the only place to do that right now is like a Paraguay, where it's a no-show residency. You just have to go a couple days every 3 years. That used to be Panama. They ended that when they got rid of the friendly nations visa. And it's like, and they make it so confusing. Like every person or attorney you talk to will tell you a different thing about the residency program there. But pretty much now,
it's pretty much everywhere in Latin America at this point.
And pretty much like you have to invest in real estate now to get, the residency deal. And the other downer of Panama is like people live there for 10 years in residence and they still can't get their citizenship. So it's a very hard process and you got to be connected to get your citizenship there. And I'm just baffled because like the Panama thing, they closed it for no good apparent reason. And their economy was very dependent on the friendly nations visa and expats coming in. And I can tell you firsthand from business and all the businesses I'm connected to were telling me how awful it was and how all the foreigners disappeared. It just ruined a lot of businesses. And I mean, obviously you saw the civil unrest with the protests and the closing of the streets. Their economy's in the tank and their government's same old. And you look at what's happening in El Salvador. They have a very, very, very long way to go, but they're making all the right moves. They're cleaning up crime. They're doing all stuff so they can make it friendly for tourists, for people to invest. And if these other countries don't stay competitive or come up with, streamlined processes for entrepreneurs, all this money is going to flood into El Salvador. If they make it zero tax, all this stuff, Bitcoin's legal, you can bank your Bitcoin and it becomes extremely safe. And they got beaches. All of those expats from Panama and Costa Rica are just going to go to El Salvador in like 2 or 3 years when this program's got its stuff together. Yeah. And these countries are going to have to be competitive and all this money is going to disappear.
Well, so going back to what you said about Panama, they closed that Friendly Nations program. That was like the double whammy because they also handled COVID
terribly
in the most aggressive manner in Latin America, destroying all tourism, all service-based businesses, completely wrecked.
You got to be a citizen to get into the country for a year and a half.
Yeah, and then after that, they're like, "Oh, we're going to close down the Friendly Nations visa." So now we have no foreign income coming in anymore. So it's like a double whammy of horrible decisions by that government. And yeah, it's going to go. The money's going to go elsewhere. I don't know where it's going to go.
The attorney I used to get my Friendly Nations visa, I had to go back and pick something up from him. And we were talking after they closed Friendly Nations visa, and it was like 8 months after they closed it. And they would process like 10 people a day. That was their bread and butter. Oh, yeah. He said in like the 8 months that they had processed 3 people for the investment residency.
Yeah.
It's pretty much essentially zero. And that's a huge impact on their economy because like, what do they have besides the canal and tourism? Like there's not a lot of businesses. There's 5 families that own everything. And I know a lot of middle-class Panamanians, and they all left. Like they all got visas to permanent residencies in Canada and left because the wages there are ridiculously low. Like if you're working for United Airlines and you're working like 16 hours a day there, you're making $600 a month with OT. And prices, they're on the dollar, are not cheap in Panama.
No,
So
Panama is
you
not cheap
have,
at all.
you
Panama
know,
is not
and
cheap.
that's another reason why expats don't like going there. Like you go down to Paraguay, you're living like a king with the dollar, and you're getting, it's cheaper in Panama, but it's not a big difference where you're saving a ton of money to entice you to just move to Panama.
No, you're not. I mean, I think when I was living in Panama, I was spending like 5-6 grand a month, which isn't
Yeah.
ridiculous. But you know, that type of money in Paraguay or Nicaragua or even Colombia, like that's living like a king. Where in Paraguay or in Panama, that was just a
My
normal expat.
I'm from Orange County, California, which is like one of the most expensive places in the United States. And my experience in the beginning of Latin America was going to, you know, Panama, which was expensive, and Costa Rica, which was extremely expensive with all the taxes. And then I had gone to Paraguay, and I hadn't converted any of my currency yet. And I met a guy at my hotel. We went to like the super nice restaurant, and we got, you know, he was ordering this giant tomahawk steak, like 4-course meal. And I was like, I'll get the same thing. So the bill comes, and I put it on my credit card. Everything's like in the hundreds of thousands with their currency. And I'm thinking this is like $100 meal. And I got the conversion on my text message from my credit card company. It was like 13, 15 bucks or something. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. And so it's like, when I go down there, man, I'm just living large. I'm going out to eat, getting the biggest steak every freaking night. And you see all the expats every night at the same restaurants, and they have great food down in Paraguay.
Well, yeah, because steak, I mean, they've got great steaks. They have better
Best
meat
meat.
than Argentina. Like they got some of the best quality meat you're going to find. And yeah, I remember when I was in Paraguay, this was before, when I was in Paraguay back in the day, this was before all the expats got there. The only other gringo I met was a couple dudes working the embassy that were Marines, like security for the U.S. embassy. So there's nobody there. But I had a steakhouse called like La Cabrera or something like
I
that.
went there. That was my last meal there.
Yeah, that was right next to my apartment.
There's
And
like
I would
three
go
of them. There's like 3 or 4 of them now.
This was the one next to close to Shopping del Sol.
Okay.
And yeah, I would go to the gym, go there, like 15 bucks. I'd get like 3 filet mignons, like 3 sides, a salad. And with tip, it was like 15, 16 bucks. It was insane.
Yeah, no, it was funny because I went down there, and then I did some deals with like Dylan and those guys down there. Everyone knows each other. There's not a lot of guys. I mean, in my book, there's like 30, 40 expats like between our ages living there, and most of them are crypto bros, and everyone kind of knows each other. It's not, and that's why I really like Paraguay. If you're a foreigner, like they love you because they don't have a big tourism industry. They don't have like a big attraction, and it's hard and expensive to get there. So
there's no tourism there.
there's
That's
no
the thing.
tourism there, and
There's
you're like,
actually
I
no
remember
tourism.
walking. I would go places, people were, and I'm 6'6", so people were staring at me, and like, you know, you're like only gringo in a lot of places. You know, where you're in Buenos Aires, it's very touristy, and you got a lot of people coming in. Another thing about Buenos Aires is like everything's cheap, but the hotels are expensive.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that? Like their cheapest hotel is like 180. Like it's because they still have a lot of demand for people going there.
Oh yeah.
And I want to talk about this. This country of, you know, Argentina, they have 100% inflation, right? And there's like the amount of crime compared to inflation is nothing. And like my thinking is like they've gone through it like every decade, so people don't panic and freak out. Like everyone knows how to like operate. Can you imagine what 100% inflation, what people would be doing in the United States?
Oh, it'd be a war zone.
It'd be a war zone.
Absolute war zone. No, they're just used to it. It happens every decade. Like
Yeah.
they like do it on purpose. I don't know what. I haven't looked into it, but literally every decade they screw that up.
And
So
the other weird thing is like their Bitcoin adoptions and the crypto adoptions isn't that good there either. Like, I mean, I guess they're getting the dollars, but like, you know, I've been there. Like, they got a couple of Bitcoin ATMs. Like, it's not. There's people doing stuff, but it's not like what you would think it would be like for a country that has 100% inflation.
Nobody wants to invest in Argentina again because it's a horrible investment. They're going to fuck up their currency. Everything's going to get deflated. Like it's just a bad investment for 90. I mean, unless somebody has a really good plan to execute on.
Yeah.
For the typical investor, they don't want to put a penny in Argentina other than just to spend some time there.
Yeah, I mean, and I was thinking if like I was gonna buy like a condo or some real estate, like I would feel very comfortable investing in Paraguay with the rule of law and stuff. But like with the Chile or Argentina, like they could just take it away from you. I just don't. You couldn't make a large investment because you just don't know what those governments are going to do. They're very left, socialist, and it's sad because Chile has both those countries have so much promise, and the leadership's just kind of run them into the ground.
They should be the best place in like one of the best places in the world because they have some of the best nature. They've got Patagonia. They've got massive cities. I mean, they've got a pretty high IQ populace, but again, that's on paper. Like Chile on paper should be one of the best countries, if not the best country in Latin America, but no one wants to go there because they speak shitty Spanish. You know, they're going communist. They're not nearly as friendly as Colombians or Brazilians or Paraguayans. Obviously, there's a social dating aspect.
So Chile had one of the nicest airports I've ever been to in South America. It's just state of the art and beautiful.
Oh yeah.
Everything else was like a rundown. There was a ton of tourists, but none of them were going because when I walked around for days in Santiago, and I was like one of 10 gringos.
No one goes. No one.
Which was shocking because I thought it was going to be a big international destination. Maybe it's just expensive to get there. But all the people at the airport, they're all going south. They were going to the Patagonia region. They're going outdoors. No one was going to the capital, but there was a lot of tourism because the airport was packed, but everyone was just going south. I want to hit that on. Now, did you get your Panamanian residency?
Yeah.
Okay. But you still haven't got your Paraguayan.
No. I was looking into that, and then I'm having a second kid, so I don't really have time to pop down there for 3 or 4 weeks and get that done.
Weren't you living there for like a month?
What's up?
Didn't you live there for like a month?
In Paraguay?
Paraguay?
I was like 4 months back in the day.
Oh wow. You should have got your residency, man.
I know, I just didn't think I wasn't like it was like 5 years ago.
You weren't in that mindset yet?
No, it was like 5 years ago. I didn't care about many things other than my social life. So
no, yeah, that's true. And I don't think until kind of COVID hit and all the stuff that people realize how important a residency and another flag can be. And I'd always looked at this stuff online, and what was weird is like there's not a lot of information on online. I was on these like ghetto websites like Panama Source Services, like I was on these ghetto little websites and trying to put this information together, and you don't know anyone in these countries. And when COVID hit, and right when they opened it up again, like there was Panama allowed citizens to come back in. I got on the next flight. I finished the residency 2 weeks after they closed it. And it was crazy because at the JW, there was a bunch of, rich dudes from America that were living in Puerto Rico that were last minute getting it. And they had set a date when they were going to end it. And then there were so many people flooding last minute. They just closed it. So like, I don't know what happened. These people paid their attorneys up front. It was just a total mess. Yeah. So I got that. And then Paraguay they had it so easy. I didn't even do the $5,000 deposit. I showed my college degree. All I had to do was pay for attorney's fees and make the 2 trips, and I got it. And then 2 months after that, now it's temporary residency. You don't have to do the deposit, but you're temporary for 2 years before you're permanent. And the thing that sucks about that is like a lot can happen in 2 years, and they might not honor that. Like they're like, all right, well, we're not going to let you become permanent. We kind of want to be more isolationist. So it's not a slam dunk, and a lot can happen in 2 years. So I'm very lucky. I just didn't wait on these things. And I tell people that listen to me, I'm like, never wait, because these programs are closing quietly and fast everywhere. And I just made a video that went pretty viral about Portugal Golden Visa closing. And I had a friend that just did it, and they, retired and moved there, and all these people had great things about it, and all these people were planning on doing it, and then out of nowhere, it's over. And, and I think people are seeing that the doors are closing. And especially if you're like middle class and like, you're not going to go out and pop for $150,000 St. Kitts second passport, all this stuff that, the elites can still do. But if you're like the average Joe, hey, you're making 6 figures and you want to secure one of these, your days are numbered and the doors are closing. And, pretty much Paraguay is the last place. In Armenia, there's only a couple places where you can just get that no-show residency.
Yeah, I mean, you still got Paraguay. Honduras is still an option. Armenia, that program sounds like it might be still an option. Mexico is actually super easy right now to get the temporary.
Okay.
Permanent's a little bit more,
I'm curious because I might do that. How do you get the temporary Mexican residency?
dude. So there's a guy on YouTube, Wandering Investor. He did a video on it, where it's essentially like if you have a passport stamp from Mexico from like the past 5 years or something. I don't know the exact details. You essentially qualify for automatic temporary residency. You just have to pay a lawyer, do a little paperwork, and you can get it done.
So I got to cross into Tijuana.
Yeah, I think it's
Things
yeah. I'm like, from what I've watched on it and read a little bit on it, it's super easy to get that temporary. And I'm actually a fan of that because, we're talking about Paraguay, Panama, Honduras, Uruguay. Those countries are tiny, right? Like there's a benefit to that, but on the flip side, like for example, Mexico City is like, 25 million people. That's like bigger than 3/4 of Central America combined.
Yeah.
So Mexico, even though like we have these stereotypes about Mexico being Americans, it's such a big country, being like the largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, that I do think it's worthwhile to get a residency here, just as part of a flag theory. Because if shit goes to hell in a handbasket in a lot of places, for example, Mexico was open during COVID. Like, you have a residency, you pop in, you've got 130 million people to interact with, dozens of millions of cities with over 1 million people. So I do think it's worthwhile for someone like you or some of your listeners to do.
How do you convert the temporary to permanent there?
I think it's 2 or 4 years, and then you can convert it.
Do you have to live there? And the other thing about all these programs where like supposedly you have to live there, like how do they enforce a lot of this? Because like, with Argentina, it's like you could just cross the border and fly out of another country, and do they know if you're living in that country?
Yeah. Well, and if you're crossing in Tijuana, are they really keeping track of anything? Like, probably not.
No.
So,
but are you supposed to be living in the country as a temp to get the permanent or no?
I do not know the details of that. I know for me personally, I have permanent residency. I'll be a Mexican citizen soon, and I do have to live here to do that. So when you have permanent, it depends on the program you use, but basically you have to spend 18 of 24 months in Mexico in the last 2 years to become a citizen.
Okay. That's cool. And then my other question I really am interested in is Honduras. Did you get the residency? Are you in the process? I want to know. I want to know the information on Honduras, and never been. Is it just give us the lowdown?
I've spent very little time, but I have been to Honduras, and I am working on the residency. So Honduras is a very easy program to do. It doesn't cost much money. Legal fees, 5, 6, 7 grand. And then you put money in a bank account, and then you basically just move money in and out of the bank account for 3 years. And so it's
how much money do you have to deposit?
$2,500 a month.
Oh, so like there has to be money coming into the account.
Yeah, but it has to be coming in. They don't care what you do with it once it's in there. So you just fucking wheel it.
So, okay. But 5 or 6 grand kind of sounds expensive for an attorney in Honduras, because like I'm comparing it to Paraguay where that's like $2,500 or something.
Yeah, so you pay for that. That's basically for the 3-year process to get citizenship.
Oh, so do you get? I thought that's just for the residency. So the residency turns into a citizenship, and that's the
benefit of Honduras. That's the benefit of Honduras, is they actually will issue passports. Now, like any Latin American country, most Latin American countries, they don't want you to have dual citizenship, but on paper, and in practice, things work differently down here. So essentially what you do is you have to spend 1 day in Honduras every year. Mm-hmm. So you start your residency process, you get your permanent residency, you start moving the money every month, you spend a week in Roatan, 1 week a year, and then after 3 years, you can apply for citizenship. And
my question: how instantly do you become the permanent resident, though? Like, what is the permanent resident process? Like, is it as soon as you make that deposit and do the paperwork, you're a resident, and then that time clicks on the 3 years for the citizenship?
It's pretty straightforward, yeah. And they don't have a lot of people doing the program, so there's not like a lot of bureaucracy, like just hold
Yeah,
up
because
and
it's not
stuff.
widely known. So there.
No.
Now, my other
Um,
question is, do you have to be in the country for all the proceedings? How many times do you have to go into
you only
Honduras?
have to go once, but the biggest thing is you have to have your documents, like everything has to be apostilled. And so when you're looking at like your FBI background check, that has to be apostilled by the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
That takes 3 months. So you basically have this month where you get your FBI background check, you ship it off to the Secretary of State in the United States if you're an American citizen. It takes about 3 months to get it apostilled, and then
I
you
did
have
it
a
in 2 weeks, man.
huh?
I did it in 2 weeks.
Dude, it took me 3 months.
There's a service that does it for you.
Yeah,
FBI apostille.com or whatever. I had it back in 2 weeks.
see, mine took 3 months.
But it costs like $150.
Yeah, it was $150. It took forever.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So that was the issue I ran into with that, and I got to redo it because I basically had that done, and I had like a 7 week window to go to Honduras, but I tore my Achilles, so I
Oh.
couldn't like go on a plane. So then that 6 month window of when they issued the FBI background check ran out and screwed up the whole process for me.
I'm actually very interested in that because it's got a path towards citizenship, because getting a second passport is a big deal because a lot of these residencies lead to nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's why I like Paraguay, because there's an option in 36 months to get a citizenship. Panama goes nowhere.
Yeah.
But it's a good flag to have. But I definitely want to get another, passport. And I know a lot of Bitcoin guys that are doing stuff on Roatan. So I met some dudes at the Bitcoin conference, and they were kind of involved in Paraguay, and they just opened like a Bitcoin education center on Roatan. And then I have a really good, crazy friend, and his dad owned like a little boutique hotel down there.
Yeah.
And they've been going down there and raising hell. And I've been hearing all these stories about that island, and I'm very curious to check it out. And there's some guys, I don't know if they're gonna be able to pull it off, but they're trying to make like a Bitcoin economic zone, and the government's like approved it kind of, where
Right?
yeah, Prospera, and where there's like no taxes and stuff, and it's like a private community. I don't know if that's just a giant marketing scheme, Ponzi, whatever. I've seen some of the stuff. I know some guys kind of involved, so I know it's not complete BS. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of those guys that, started that. I don't know if they were the founder or CFO or what, I can't remember. They seem to have hit some bumps in the road because
Okay.
a couple of years ago it sounded pretty awesome. But currently they're having a lot of issues with, there's a new president, a new government involved. A lot of the locals don't like them because there's like water rights and land rights and all this stuff. So they seem to have hit some bumps in the road. But on the flip side, could be a really interesting project because there's actually no like high rise apartments and communities and things like that on Roatan. So, they're called, I think they called their first building the Duna Residence.
Mm.
And it was like the highest building in Roatan.
Oh wow.
So if they actually could pull that off, it'd probably be a pretty cool place. I think they have
I
plans.
think it could happen because like it's for Americans in Western, it's a short flight down there. It's beautiful, beautiful beaches, and they can control the environment because it's on an island, right? And like they can, and like if it was on the mainland, I feel like they could clean up the crime and all that stuff. But on the other end, I know some very respected guys. They're kind of like intelligence kind of guys, and I was talking about this to them, like all pie in the sky, and they were like, "Dude, they're like, we own some land on Roatan. Like we can't sell it." He's like, there's some bad crimes that happen there, and they sweep it under the rug. You just won't see it in the news, type of stuff. And I believe these guys a lot. So, did you go to Roatan when you were there or no?
No, I was in the capital for like 24 hours, a real quick trip. But
So is there anything going on in the capital, or is it pretty?
no, mainland Honduras is dangerous as fuck. Like on paper, it should be pretty dope because it's a super beautiful country. But nah, I mean
You just stay in the hotel.
it's like what El Salvador was 5 years ago, where it's like it's so dangerous, you don't feel comfortable really doing anything. Especially if you
As a foreigner.
as a foreigner who
Oh, I
doesn't.
mean, are there any expats there, or it's just probably no foreigners?
Dude, I'm in the expat group on Facebook for one Tegucigalpa, I think there's like 300 people in the whole fucking group. Like there's no
The whole country there.
yeah, and like three-fourths of them are married to like some local, and that's the only reason they're in that group because they want to like know about the city when they go down for Christmas. So
Holy
it's
shit.
like there's no expats in mainland Honduras for good reason.
Okay. No, that's interesting. I'm interested in that because this is, I think it's going to be super easy, and it has a second you can get a second, third passport there. Now, kind of tying it up, what does the future hold, do you think, in like macroeconomics? You think we're hitting recession? What do you think is going on in Eastern Europe? And kind of in my opinion, this is like, you zoom out, this is what's happening. I think we're going to a recession, and I think the Fed thinks they can control the economy by gradually raising the interest rates, but there's so much leverage in the system that things are going to break uncontrollably pretty soon. And then they're going to be like, oh, we're going to lower rates. But things are going to be crashing so hard that lowering these rates isn't going to do anything. Not until they start pumping more money in will things stop bleeding. And then I think the game's up, where people are going to be like, hey, man, all this money is going to come back into Bitcoin, stocks, real estate, and people are going to want hard assets. That's kind of what I think is going to go on. I don't know. What do you think?
I think they only have two choices. That's not my area of expertise, but I'll give my opinion on it. I think they have two choices. They either turn the money printer back on, or they basically take down the system and institute CBDCs. I don't think there's any other option, because I think we're already in a recession, and I think there's really no way to improve it other than turning the money printer back on, or a different form of that in CBDCs. Yeah. I think that's their only two options. So I would prefer if they turn the money printer back on, because then all our businesses, people are just.
It's getting rough out there. And what I also see a lot firsthand, being in the trenches down in South America and working, is there's a lot of crypto bros in these countries, and they made a lot of money on a short period of time, and they were kind of living off of it. And then crypto crashed. A lot of them were trading. A lot of people lost a lot of money. And these people have no income, and there's not opportunity and jobs there. And, I just posted this video, and I was like, hey, if you're making 100 grand in the US, you have like a work remote job, you can go down and live large down there. But I'm like, you can't go down there and make 6 figures. You have to have a job, like
you have to have an income
type of thing, set up. And the scary thing right now is, like, if you go on those websites to get like work remote jobs, like there's over 1,000 applications for every work remote job right now. So, and that's going to hurt the Latin American economy, because the expats going down there spending money on hotels and all that stuff is drying up as those, work remote jobs are drying up. Those guys everyone's got to go back into the office. Is kind of what I'm seeing. I don't see an influx of people going down right now.
Well, we had a huge influx, like right post COVID, like mid 2021. And up until now, where there's like 10 times more foreigners here in Latin America. You can see it in Paraguay, Guadalajara, Buenos Aires. There's way more foreigners that are actually living abroad versus just spending a week or two. If remote work dries up and people are forced to go back to the office, or, we're seeing way more layoffs and layoffs and layoffs, then the number of expats in Latin America is going to dry up as well. And it's only going to be entrepreneurs, retirees, those type of people, which for me personally, I'm like, all right,
Yeah, there's less competition, but it's scary though. Like when I look at these, countries like Paraguay and stuff, it's like, hey, in the US, you lose your job and it's like 99 weeks of unemployment. You get all these benefits, and you can gather yourself and get back into something. But it's like, you lose your job in those countries, they don't have social welfare. You're out, and it's like you're one job loss away from like spiraling down. They don't have those safety nets. So when those economies go, it's pretty scary, because like the government's not coming to save you there.
Yeah, they have to. Well, and I think they also are, other than Venezuela and Argentina, a lot of these countries don't get too crazy with their economic policies, because they don't have that that wiggle room that the West has, where they can fuck up things, people get fired, but they still get unemployment. They turn the money printer on. We have a little bit of savings, whatever. Obviously in Paraguay or Bolivia or something, there's no safety net like that. So they can't do some of the stuff that the United States government does that affects our economy, because they just don't have that safety net. And I think if you look at it, you can see it happening in Colombia, where COVID fucked up the economy. They elected a communist, not a communist, a socialist, whatever you want to call him, and the economy is tanking. And now there's way more crime against foreigners. There's way more people getting drugged. There's way more street crime. Like when I was in Colombia a ton, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. It was pretty chill.
Yeah.
I've never been robbed in Colombia one time. And now you're hearing stories like every third dude in Medellin is getting scolopamine to getting drugged.
I'm on Twitter and all that stuff, and I've come across a lot of videos. I just saw a TikTok. This guy's a digital nomad, and one guy was traveling by himself, and they just knocked him out, took his phone. He was in the streets crying and stuff, and it was pretty sad. And they had to help him out, get him back. And then another one, you might have reposted on Twitter, where the guy went on a date with a 20-year-old Venezuelan girl, and he woke up and they took everything. They took the food out of the fridge, like his socks, his clothing. He didn't have anything but his underwear left. Like, worst nightmare, like a movie. Like you wake up, everything's all the hangers are gone. You know, in these Telegram chats, you know, you're seeing all this stuff, and some of these guys are getting hurt.
Oh yeah, I mean they're getting robbed, and they're getting drugged, and they're, you know, the thing that's different about what's going on now is these criminals, these gangs, they know how to get into your bank account. They know how to get into your PayPal account. They have connections with local stores where they can take a stolen credit card, and they're going to let them use it, and they're going to run the transaction and make sure it goes through. They know how to get into your crypto. They know how to get into all your passwords.
They're getting sophisticated.
Yeah,
now is a lot of
organized crime. It's not like one dude or one chick just drugs you and steals your electronics and wipes them. It's actually a gang behind it that is, they drug you, they're in your apartment, and then at that point they're calling up the tech guys for the gang, being like, hey, what I need to do, and they're wiping them.
Wow. So be careful in Colombia. Yeah. Now, is a lot of this crime from a lot of the influx of Venezuelans in the country?
I mean, that's what Colombians will tell you. But,
yeah,
it's
everyone.
Yeah, it's
now like these, because these stories are going all over the place. You think that's kind of going to deter like a solo digital nomad?
The thing about it is a lot of dudes don't have imagination. They don't do a lot of research. Like one of their buddies goes to Medellin and he comes back and he's like, shows a couple photos of chicks he went on dates with. And he's like, oh man, Medellin's paradise. And dude doesn't do any research. He just takes his homie's advice and strolls down there.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I think places like Medellin, Cartagena, I posted about this on Twitter the other day, Mexico City, Playa del Carmen, you know, these really expat heavy Latin American cities, I think they're going to get more dangerous for, you know, digital.
Well, I mean, as you know, inflation goes and crime's going to go up, you know, everywhere. I went to Colombia pre-COVID a couple of years ago, but I was with some connected locals. I had a blast, and it was like right after the first season of Narcos had come out, and everyone was like, still think Pablo Escobar's running the country, and just had such a bad perception. And I went there, I had zero problems, I had a total blast.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this place is, and this was like 5 or 6 years ago, and I was like, this place is going to blow up. I was in St. Marta. I went to Tayrona National Park, and I was like, at the entrance, like they didn't even have hotels. Like I was staying in like a hostel in a hammock. I'm like, this place is going to be like huge one day. I'm like, this is one of the greatest national parks I've ever seen in my life. And then it did, like the years following, tourism to Colombia exploded once people realized like it wasn't super dangerous. I loved Cartagena. I loved the old town. Went bar hopping in there, but like you got to be cognizant. Like I remember coming back 2 or 3 in the morning because I had to get back from the old town. And it was like 2 or 3 blocks, and I was staying at a boutique hotel, and it was just like you got that little sketchy walk. You gotta pay attention, and you know, losing. You know what's funny? I just did like 3 months of traveling. I was in Bolivia traveling, so all these countries by myself. I flew back to the Bitcoin Miami conference, and I got pickpocketed on Ocean Drive in freaking Miami. I mean, I just traversed all, third world countries, and I got robbed in Miami. And
That's not surprising. I mean,
not
that's really not
surprising
surprising.
at all. And it was like, I paid like to go 8 blocks in an Uber in Miami, like what I would spend in like 2 weeks Ubering every day in Paraguay.
Yeah, your 8-block Uber in Miami is like a dinner for 8 people at a 5-star restaurant in Paraguay.
Yeah, and you know what? And like being from California, and like I hadn't traveled to those like cheap areas before. Like until you go and experience, you're like, wow, I could really live, good. And people are always asking me, they're like, what's the best place to go? I'm like, dude, every person's different. You're a single guy. Are you married with a family? Do you want the beach? It depends what you're looking for. But I really think, I mean, I'm in California right now. I just got my third Southern California Edison or whatever gas increase. It just made the national news. Like it just went up 8%, just went up 9%. And I'm like, if you're making on a salary, I'm like, I don't know how people are affording this right now.
Oh yeah.
If you're going zero hedge, look up the gas prices in California. It's to heat your home and stuff. It's just ridiculous right now. It's like, we're just going to wear jackets in our houses, and people's quality of lives are going down, and people don't talk about the standard of living that's, going down. And like I think you could read an article, and it's like, if you're making under 100 grand in Orange County, like it's poverty. Like you can't do anything. The average medium home price is 1.5 million dollars in Orange County. It's ridiculous. And like the millennials, like how much money do you have to be making just to buy some crappy 30-year-old home for $1.5 million? And it's like, you could go down to these countries, buy a brand new mansion.
My best friend lives in Hermosa, and him and his wife, I mean, they do very well, multiple 6 figures for themselves. He's like, I can never buy a house here. He's like, the houses in Hermosa Beach, for a shitty 2-bedroom shack, it's $2 million. He's like,
I have some friends that have bought property there, and like what they showed me they bought for over $1 million.
Oh,
it's horrifyingly bad. And I'm like, dude, I was like, if this market doesn't go up forever, I'm like, these things are going down like 60-70%. Like I literally am shocked at what people are paying. And you're starting to see a pause in real estate. But I never know with real estate, because like, here's what can happen is like the government can just give unlimited money to BlackRock and have them start buying real estate up. Yep. Or they're just like, hey, just like COVID, you don't have to pay your mortgages anymore. And what happened is it made a short squeeze, because all the people that would have foreclosed, or just the normal bankruptcy process, couldn't get closed on by the banks legally. So less inventory than normal happened. It made this huge short squeeze. And at the same time, you have this whole, you have BlackRock private equity buying single family homes. And then you have the whole Airbnb flip to rent. And I have friends, dude, that, they got into this, they're making a killing. And it's like, they buy one house, they get equity in it, they borrow against the equity, buy another house, and they're all, they got 20, 30, rentals. Where back when before Airbnb, the 2009 crisis, you would flip, right? And then you would sell it, and you only had the capital to do a couple homes at a time, right? Because, you had to sell one to get the, the cash for the next one. But what's happening now is all you do is borrow against that equity, and the banks are allowing it to happen. So you start with 1 or 2 homes. These guys got 30, 40 homes, and they don't have long-term tenants. So say when that market blows up, it's going to be the first one to go, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't have someone renting this Airbnb this week. You instantly don't have money. And then all of a sudden, hey, you're covering rent on 20 homes, and you have no other income, or like, you got maybe $70,000 job or whatever, but most of these guys quit to go full time. And then boom. And I swear, if I see one more commercial for Amazon drop shipping or how to do my Airbnb flipping, I'm going to lose my mind. Like this is the epitome of a bubble. It's like every sponsored ad is a guru trying to tell you how to do this. And I'll tell you this, I was one of the first Amazon sellers. Like I had started like 8 or 9 years ago, and I got in like early. I made money. It was a great time. And I'm just looking at people doing it now, and it's like, I used to make 200-300% margins on everything. And now it's like, Amazon makes it harder and harder. They force you to take returns on everything, and you're fighting over the same products, and the margins have just collapsed, and you're paying Amazon 15 to 20%. You're just working for Amazon pretty much.
Yeah.
I
mean, everything on the internet like that. I mean, right now everybody wants to do, like we've talked about, be an influencer. A few years back, everybody wanted to do drop shipping. A few years before that, it was Amazon seller. Before that, it was affiliate marketing. Like all this shit goes in cycles.
Yeah.
But once you start seeing the guru ads on
It's
Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, you're like, that's a bubble. That there's a lot of people doing that, especially when you start seeing dudes like, oh, buy my course to do X, Y, and Z. Once you start seeing that, then it's like, yeah, this might be a bubble.
Yeah, and kind of for the crypto people out there, like I remember like I first got in, like, oh, I'm just gonna buy this, hold it, and be rich. And then it's like, no, you have to have a business like that generates income and then you invest in this stuff. Just buying it, holding it, you gotta go out and be productive, produce a service that people want, and then save in Bitcoin and and you'll generate some wealth that way. But there's no easy money right now. All of these shit coins have just gone down like 99%.
Well,
And I think we're gonna have a crazy crypto bull market in the future. Once money starts getting to value like on the scale that's never been seen before, you're just gonna see like like the Wall Street bet stuff like gone berserk
yeah,
again.
I mean, I think that there's definitely potential for that to happen, but ultimately, like you said, you have to have a business. And if we're looking at like investments, the only investment you truly control is your business, right? So
Yeah.
when we're looking to the future, right, and we're like, we want to position ourselves to, invest properly, become wealthy, this, that, and the other. I think the best thing, crypto obviously is good, might have its day. It probably will again. There's obviously some real estate plays, whether that be in the States or in somewhere like Paraguay or Mexico. But ultimately, like the best investment, in my opinion, is just having a business that you can use as a flywheel where you can just continually reinvest and grow, and you can actually have control of it versus, you buy a house in whatever market. There's so many factors you can't control, safety in the area, how the government, lending rates, everything. There's so much shit that's just not in your control. Whereas with your business, you actually have that control. So from my perspective, with all the uncertainty we're dealing with and all that shit, I just want a flywheel in my business where I can just put cash in, get my percent out. That's
Well,
kind of where I'm looking at right now.
well, in closing, I would, implore everyone, you want to be your own boss and you're never going to be wealthy, working, for someone else. And I would rather, make $60,000-$70,000 running my own business than making 200-300 grand working for somewhere else. And what people are going to find out in this next recession is there's no corporate loyalty. Like back in the day, my grandfather, you worked for the same company for 40 years. He got a pension, retired early. That doesn't exist. And these people, that had it all good at Google, Facebook, thought they, were the shit. They get an email. They didn't even get, a phone call. And I had this one friend, he'd only worked at this pharma job since he graduated college. And they fired him just email. He just woke up one day, opened his laptop, and he couldn't log into any information. They didn't give him a call, nothing. It was just so disrespectful, the culture of, letting people go. And I understand, like, as an employer, probably the hardest thing to do is fire someone and go face to face and like tell them that. But these, spineless corporations are just sending these emails. And it's going to kind of probably create the next wave of entrepreneurs because people realize you're just not going to make it working for someone else. And with this inflation, right? If you're on a salary, you're not going to keep up with this inflation that's coming down the pipe. And if you own a business and you sell goods and services, you can keep increasing your prices with inflation and go with it. But when you don't have your own business, you're a fixed income. You're not going to be able to go with the wave of inflation, and you're really going to get burned. And it's going to be sickening because with social media today, you're really seeing how the 1% live on their jets, on their yachts. And you really get a glimpse into that where I remember my dad telling me, he's like, I didn't know I was poor. Like, he was like, I was poor, but he's like, I didn't know I was poor back then. And he was like, and not until like,
That's
I
such a good
accidentally
point.
drove into Beverly Hills or you didn't see it. And this wealth is just in your face, now. And, and it's really bad because all these young girls, they see that and like everyone wants the stuff, but no one wants to work for it either. And,
Well, and when you're talking about what you said just a minute ago, basically that, if you could make 50, 60, 70 grand for yourself from your computer, regardless of what happens with inflation and the economy in the States, you can take that income, You can go to Paraguay, Argentina, Bolivia, I mean, Colombia, and that income, you're going to live a very high quality of life. And, to live that same standard of life, you would need a corporate job that's making 250K a year in California or, Texas, Florida. So ultimately, when we're talking about that, is being able to be location independent is going to allow you to avoid a lot of the pain that's going to come with this inflation, the economy, and things like that. Because when one place gets fucked up, you pop off to the next place, even if you don't have the same amount of money, you're still going to be able to live good.
Yeah, and for me, I was in America. You pay taxes everywhere. For me, it's a backup plan. Like I saw what happened with COVID. People are, I didn't have the residency set up. I got all my stuff done in the last 2 years, and I was prepared before people were scrambling in the stores and stuff. But I'm like, people were fighting over toilet paper. I mean, they brushed all the footage of all the riots. It was all disappeared. The store owners getting beat up. I mean, all that stuff. It was nasty, and it was like that. Those were unique to pretty much America and Europe. Those riots and stuff weren't happening in the countries we're talking about. No. And you know what? If the dollar goes down, it's going to be bad everywhere. But in these big cities where people are been spoiled with such a high standard of living, they're going to lose it. They're going to be spoiled brats when things go down. And if you go to, places like Paraguay where people are more rural, they're independent and strong, like they used to be back in the day in the US, people will get through it. But I think people will turn on each other in a lot of these big cities. And I want to be able to hop on a flight, be drinking pina coladas on the beach in freaking Panama while people are fighting over toilet paper. And that's the whole point of this. And you know what? I used to get worked up over the news, and I used to be all political. And once I got set up, once I realized it was all a scam, and I was just getting played. And then once I got set up with my residency and stuff, and I don't care. I don't watch the news. If anything goes wrong, I got stuff set up elsewhere, and I don't have to be completely dependent on politicians in America anymore. And it's very refreshing going to these countries. I couldn't name you one politician in any of these countries. I don't know.
Except Bukele or whatever in El Salvador.
Besides Nayib Bukele, I don't know what's going on, and I don't care. I don't want to know. And they don't have a big enough government to force all this stuff onto their local populations like the U.S. does. Like,
and it's not blood sport. Like you go to Paraguay, no one's talking about politics. No one cares. They have real problems to deal with. And if they don't have real problems to deal with, they're just fucking enjoying life. It's culturally in a lot of these smaller Latin American countries, even Mexico as well, politics isn't blood sport. So it's not like I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, or, Biden's fucking up the economy or Trump's doing this. There's none of that shit here. I mean, there's some of it, but it's like 1/100th of what it is in the States. So going back to kind of your point is, you go to a coffee shop in the morning, you don't walk through the coffee shop to order your latte and hear a bunch of people talking bullshit about politics. And you're like, these people are retarded. I don't want to speak. I don't want to ever hear that again. You don't have to. You go to the coffee shop in Paraguay, people are just smiling and happy and whatever. Nobody's talking about anything geopolitical, politics, Russia, Ukraine. That's not a part of life in these countries. So
it doesn't affect them. And one of the big sellers on Paraguay, if you're like a prepper and you want to bug out, it is rural. It's got all the food. It's got all the agricultural. It's got unlimited energy from the second largest hydroelectric dam in the world. It's got everything to be self-sustaining for a very long time. For Panama, I mean, they import most of their food. It's with the canal there, the U.S. military is there. It is a hot spot if anything goes down. Panama, there's already kind of behind the scenes tug of war between China and the U.S. and Panama, and you can see it. Like you go to a bar, you're running into American Special Forces there. Like there's a lot of stuff going behind the scenes. Paraguay, no one cares about. But there is probably the largest embassy in South America is in Paraguay, and they're expanding it. It is massive because they're allies, and it's kind of in the heart of South America. So the U.S. does have a big embassy there, and kind of
I rode in their armored cars when I was in Paraguay. That was an experience for me. So those U.S. Embassy armored Suburbans in Paraguay, those doors weigh like 10 times what a normal Suburban door weighs. It's fucking insane. Like I'm 220 pounds, and it was hard for me to open the door. It was so fucking heavy. Like it's pretty crazy.
Did you tear your Achilles heel wrestling?
Yeah, jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Um, no, don't want to run in this guy in a dark alley. Well, hey man, that was an awesome interview. And Jake has a Substack. I'll put it in the link. And I mean, he's got thousands of followers on there, and he's got the best articles about all the countries and like where to go. I look at his stuff. Like I'm doing this stuff kind of for a living, and I look at Jake's Substack and recommendations on Twitter. He's got 20 plus thousand followers on Twitter. So I'll put his Twitter link and Substack in here, and I'm going to put this in my Telegram group, and feel free to reach out to Jake for anything. But thanks again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Travis.